Page 20, continued para. The obligation of the Samantas to pay yearly tributes to the emperor is evident. Their second obligation to pay homage to the emperor in person is graphically described by Bana. He tells us how the defeated Mahasamantas greeted the conqueror by removing their crowns and headdresses, within bracket Sekhara and Mali, bracket close, stop. They were subjected to various kinds of humiliation in the court of Harsha. Some served as bearers of fans, others prayed for life by tying a sword to their neck. And still others, deprived of all their possessions, were always eager to salute the emperor with folded hands and allowed their beard to grow till their fate was finally decided by the conqueror. Footnote 1 to 8, para. Defeated kings, apparently reduced to the position of the Samantas, were made to render three kinds of services to king in the court. They held chowries, chowries, as the conquered hostile vassal chiefs did in the court of Harsha, 129. They served as doorkeeper in the court by holding a rod of cane in the hand, 130. And they served as reciters of auspicious words, uttering, quote, success, unquote, Jaya, 131. These three modes of serving by the defeated kings, bracket, Parichariki Karuna, bracket closed, are enumerated by Bana in the Kadambari 132. What appears to be a humiliation was considered a privilege by them. They made repeated inquiries with the gatekeeper about the possibility of getting an audience with the emperor. 133. Para. The obligation of presenting daughters to the conqueror is known from the Allahabad inscription, but not from Bana, according to whom the defeated Samantas furnished their minor princes or sons to the conqueror. 134. Probably these were to be trained in the imperial tradition so that they might grow loyal to their overlord. On the other hand, on the occasion of the installation of Yashovati as chief queen, the wives of noble Samantas consecrated her with water from golden pitchers and thus offered her their services. 135. This, however, appears as an obligation to be carried out in times of peace, but by and large the obligations of the vassals known from Bana relate to the defeated chiefs called Shatru Mahasamanta, required to serve the conqueror in various ways in consequence of their defeat. Para. Whether the Samantas had any administrative or judicial functions to perform in times of peace is stated neither in the law books nor in the Harsha Charita. However, we learn that on the advice of the Pradhana chief, page 21, Samantas whose voice could not be disregarded, Rajya Vardhana, took food, 136, when he was afflicted with grief on the loss of his sister Rajashri. If the counsel of the vassals could not be ignored in personal matters, how could it be on administrative matters which required their help and cooperation? Para. Some Samantas made religious grants without reference to their overlord. One of the earliest examples is the Vappa Ghoshavata grant of Jayanga, who ruled in the latter half of the 6th century with his headquarters at Karna Suvarnaka in the district of Murshidabad, 137. It states that his Samanta, Narayana Bhadra, who was enjoying the Adambarika district, asked the Pratihara Suryasena to convey his order granting the village Vappa Ghoshavata to Bhatta Brahma Swamin, 138, which was done through a copperplate charter. 139. The practice was not confined to eastern India. In the first half of the 7th century AD 140, the Samanta Indra Raja granted a village to a Brahmana in Madhya Pradesh 141, apparently without reference to his overlord who is not mentioned by him. Para. It seems that the Samantas living in the court had to carry out certain social obligations. They took part in the various amusements such as gambling, dice playing, playing on the flute, drawing portraits of the king, solving puzzles, etc. 142. Similarly, their wives also had to attend the court on festive occasions. 143. Thus, the vassals were linked with the lord not only militarily and administratively, but also socially. Para. Bana speaks of Samanta, Mahasamanta, Apta Samanta, Pradhana Samanta, Shatru Mahasamanta, and Prati Samanta. Of these, the Mahasamanta was obviously a step higher than the Samanta, and the Satru Mahasamanta was a conquered enemy chief. Apta Samantas 144 were probably those who willingly accepted the vassalage of the overlord. Pradhana Samantas were the most trusted hands of the emperor, who never disregarded their advice, but it is difficult to make anything out of the term Prati Samanta 145. Probably he was a vassal opposed to the king or merely a hostile vassal. In any case, it is clear that the usage of the term Samanta was well established, and there were as many as half a dozen kinds of vassals. I now read the footnotes covering page 20 to 21 from 1 to 8 to 145. Footnote 1 to 8 HCP 60, 1 to 9 IBID, 130 HCP 194, 131 Agrawala Kadambari pages 1 to 7 to 8, 132 IBID, 133 HC page 60, 134 IBID page 45, 135 IBID page 167, 136 IBID page 178, 137 EI Roman XV III 60 to 2, 138 IBID, 7, 2I 1 to 7, 139 IBID, 2I 7 to 14, 140 EI 33 209, 141 IBID 41, 2 7 to 15, page 61 footnote, 142 Agrawala Kadambari page 100, 143 HC page 143, 144 IBID page 155. Back to text, page 21. Para. The princes no better than vassals were divided into 3 categories, page 22. 1I, the Satru Mahasamantas were rendered various services to the emperor and were treated with respect. 2, the Mahipalas, who were forced to submit to the prestige, Pratapa of the emperor. And 3, those who were attracted to him out of their admiration and affection, Anuraga for him. 146. At one place, Bana refers to Anurakta Mahasamantas, which might suggest that they were especially attached to their overlord. Para. Normally, an important duty of these Rajas and Samantas was to render military aid to their overlord. The description of the march of Harsha shows that the army is made up of the troops, men and horse, supplied by the Rajas, and their number is so huge that Harsha is amazed at the sight of the concourse. 147. Even discounting an element of exaggeration in the number of Harsha's army, as recorded by Huan Sung, this is so huge that the contrast between his army and that of the Mauryas is quite evident. It would be too much to expect that, with diminished resources over which Harsha's government did not exercise the same amount of control as the Mauryas, he would be able to maintain such a vast army, apparently not essential for the day-to-day defense of a kingdom much smaller in extent. The only probable explanation seems to be that this was a feudal militia, which was mustered only in times of war. This hypothesis is borne out by the eye-hole inscription composed in praise of his valiant adversary Pulakesin, which describes Harsha as equipped with the hosts supplied by his vassals, 148. It is obvious that the practice of supplying troops to the lord made him dependent on his feudatories. Para. It is not clear whether the Samantas were bound to Harsha by grants of the revenues of villages, but this was exactly the relation between the emperor and the Agraharikas, who, however, seem to have owed no obligation to their benefactor. Some Agraharikas on their own initiative came out of their villages to welcome Harsha with curd, raw sugar, gura and sugar in closed cases, and the Dandadharis scared them away by means of threats and chidings. 149. But in general, probably the grantees did something more than wish Harsha well in his expedition by getting pitchers lifted in the hands of the village elders. Mahattaras 150. Page 23, para. Our discussion of the duties of the Samantas and similar other dignitaries should not lead us to think that these are precisely defined in any law book or theoretical text of Gupta or post-Gupta times, but they are clearly reflected in some contemporary literary works. Para. Central authority was further undermined by the loss of royal monopoly over the possession of horses and elephants, especially the latter. In the pre-Maurya period, elephants seem to have been ordinarily owned by the king, for in a Jataka story, an elephant is given as a reward by a king to the 30 families forming a village, 151. Where power lay in the hands of more than one man, every member of the ruling class had to supply an elephant to the state. This was the case with the 5,000-strong aristocratic state on the BS 152. We learn from Megasthenes that in the Maurya period no private person was allowed to keep either a horse or an elephant, for these animals were held to be the special property of the king. 153. Quoting from Megasthenes, Strabo states that royal stables were provided for horses and elephants and a royal magazine for arms because the soldier had to return his arms to the magazine and his elephant to the stables. 154. The number of horses and elephants possessed by the king was considerable, for Kautilya provides for the posts of superintendent of horses and elephants. 155. Thus, in the pre-Maurya and Maurya periods, horses and elephants do not seem to have been owned by private individuals. The old tradition of elephants being the exclusive possession of the king is recorded in the Raghuvangsha, in which, along with other things, elephants from the forest are said to constitute the wages of the king for protecting the earth. 156. But, in fact, from the post-Maurya period onwards, the positions began to change. The Milinda Pahya states that the best of elephants, horses, etc. belong to the king, 157, which shows that royal possession was limited only to the elephants of the best quality. This monopoly was further undermined in the Gupta period. Narada lays down that owners of elephants and horses should not pay any fine for mischief caused by these animals, for they are looked upon as protectors of the king's subjects. 158. I read now the footnotes from 146 to 158. 146 Ibid, page 60, cf. Agrawala Harshacharita, page 43. 147 HC PP 209-10. 148 Samanta Sena Mukutamani Mayuk Akranta Pada Aravinda, verse 23. 149 HC, page 212. 150 Ibid, 151 Jat JAT 1200. 152 Strabo 1537. McCrindle, Ancient India as Described in Classical Literature, page 45. 153 Strabo 1541-43. McCrindle, Ancient India as Described by Megasthenes and Aryan, page 90. 154 Strabo 1552. McCrindle, Ancient India as Described in Classical Literature, page 55. 155 Ibid, 155 AS 230-32. 156 XVII 66. 157 ED V Trenkner TRENCKNER, page 192. 158 11 stop 32 CF, 30. Text, page 23. This signifies that horses and elephants were owned by private individuals, although superintendents, page 24, of these animals are mentioned as important functionaries in the law book of Brihaspati 159 and also in contemporary inscriptions. We further learn that the possession of horses and elephants by the high functionaries of the state was considered a menace to royal power. Thus, the Kamandaka Nitisara, a post-Gupta text, provides that information should be kept about the elephants and horses of the Mahamatra, superior officer, and the Purohita, chief priest, 160. While in the interest of the ruler, vigil was to be maintained over the military strength of the high functionaries. In relation to the subjects, they were allowed an amount of latitude which they did not enjoy before. Gautama, a law book which is pre-Maurya in its essentials, imposes a fine on the owner whose horse causes damage, 161. But in such a case, Narada exempts the owners of elephants and horses on the ground that they are protectors of the subjects, 162. Another passage of the same text, however, implies that the owner of a horse is liable to punishment for the offense committed by the animal if it has been deliberately set to do it, 163. So it would appear that in the Gupta period, owners of elephants and horses, who were probably local chiefs, were regarded as natural protection of the people, a function which was formally discharged by regularly appointed officers of the state. Para. The number of elephants possessed by chiefs and princes seems to have determined their relative status. According to a Chinese account of AD 727, the Central Indian king possessed 900 elephants and the big chiefs possessed 200 to 300 elephants, 164. In between we find the princes of middle rank. Thus, the king of South India owned 800 elephants, that of West India 500 to 600 elephants, and that of North India 300 elephants, 165. Para. In India, the need for protection did not lead to any considerable practice of commendation, which was so common in Europe on account of the anarchical conditions created by barbarian invasions. Nevertheless, the law book of Vishnu, a work of about the 3rd century AD, states that in order to obtain wealth and security, the householder should apply to a lord, 166. But actual examples of commendation are very few. According to an inscription of about the 8th century AD from the district of Hazaribagh, Bihar, page 25. the people of 3 villages commended themselves to a merchant prince who offered them protection by meeting on their behalf a demand made by their king for Avalagana 167. With the king's approval, they requested the merchant to become their Raja, and he readily agreed to do so 168. It is held that the term Avalaga or Olaga is of Kannada origin and means military service to or attendance on one's lord. 159. We may add that since the Karnatas are mentioned as serving in the army of the Palas from the 8th century AD onwards, they may have introduced this word in the north. But we are not sure whether the term Avalagana used in this inscription carries the meaning proposed above. According to this record, Adi Simha, the king of Magadha, demands Avalagana 170 from 3 villages, which obviously means royal dues in cash and kind, and not some kind of feudal service rendered by the tenant to his lord or by the lord to his overlord. Of course, when the merchant Udayamana undertakes to pay Avalagana on behalf of the villages and the king installs him as the Raja of 3 villages 171, it implies a kind of feudal contract between the overlord and his vassal, similar to that which we find in Europe. Further, when Udayamana makes over one of the villages to his younger brother, who is made a kind of sub-Raja 172, it clearly illustrates secular sub-infeudation. Whatever might be the meaning of the term Avalagana, which does not appear in any early medieval land grant, but in 2 Prakrit texts of the 8th century and again in the texts of the 12th, 14th or even 16th century 173. The inscription in question certainly exemplifies the feudal practices of commendation and sub-infeudation leading to the weakening of central authority. Para. There is another important indication that central authority was growing weaker and local lords stronger. Narada lays down that those who oppose the king and prevent the payment of taxes should be dealt with by similar people. 174. Although the theory of quote, divide and rule unquote is very old, the advice that disorderly elements should be used one against the other suggests that officials under the direct control of the state were incapable of dealing with certain powerful individuals who, in all probability, approximated to the status of feudal intermediaries. I read the footnotes from 159 to 174. 159, Sanskara Kanda, page 301, verse 305. 160, KNS 1244. 161, ED AF Stanzler, STENZLER 12.24. 162, 11.32. 163 NAR stop XV stop comma XVI comma 32. 164 Jan Yun Hua quote Hugh Chow and his work Clone, a reassessment unquote, the Indo-Asian culture 12.184. 165 Ibid. 166 Atho Yogakshema Artham Ishwaram Adhigachet LXIII.I. 167 EI Roman II 27 II 6 to 7. 168 Ibid, 11, 1 to 10. 169 Summaries of Papers, Silver Jubilee Session of the Indian History Congress, Pune 1963, page 15. 170 EI Roman II 27, 1.7. 171 Ibid 11.7 to 8. 172 Ibid. 11.9 to 11. 173 an article on Avalagana by Dasharath Sharma submitted to the Pune session 1963 of the Indian History Congress. 174 NAR stop X stop 4, 5 and 7.